I'm Freddie, and I read 9 books in January, divided into 4 audiobooks, 4 physical books, and 1 ebook. 8 of those were in English, and 1 was in Danish. Sage one wants to come visit. She hears me talking, and she feels left out, and then she comes. This happens on like Zoom meetings and everything as well. Sage one. She ignores me most of the time, but now I'm doing something, so Sage one. I love you, but yeah, I was in the middle of something. Yeah. Right now. It was a generally good reading month. I enjoyed what I read. So let's just get into the books. We'll start with the 1 ebook I read this month, which was Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. If you don't know, this is the 5th book in the Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson. It's planned to be a 10-book series with 2 5-book arcs. So this, as the 5th book, ends out the first arc. That's why it's kind of hard to tell you what it's about, because that would spoil a lot in the previous books. I gave this book 5 stars. Loved it. It both gave me what I wanted, things I wasn't expecting, things I was hoping for. I just feel like it really ended out this arc very well. It's going to be a while before we see the next arc, and that makes me a bit sad and nervous because I'm very excited for the second half based on how the first half ended. But overall, I love this book. I love these characters. It made me very emotional. I was very happy to read it, and also very sad to read it at the same time. That's a good book. Now let's get into the audiobooks I read this month, starting with Voyage of the Damned by Francis White. In this book, we follow Ganymedes, who does his very best to make sure everyone is disappointed in him. In this world, there's 12 blessed at a time, who are individuals blessed with magical powers. So we have Ganymedes and these 11 other blessed on this ship for a voyage, and one of them suddenly dies. And we have these remaining 11 people cut off on this ship trying to figure out how they died, why, and we're following Ganymedes as he's investigating. I gave this book 4 stars. I enjoyed it. I liked Ganymedes. He had me in my emotional feels several times throughout the book. I also liked the mystery element. I was very intrigued because I kept having, theories that were proven wrong or proven right, and there were several twists that I didn't see coming. I liked how the story ended as well. I felt it was a satisfying ending to the story, so that's why I gave it 4 stars. Next, I read Blood of the Old Gods by SuungIl Kim. In this book, we're in an empire where the corpses of sorcerers are used kind of like batteries to power the empire, which I thought was a very cool element. We follow Lorraine, who is a woman whose family was killed by the empire and she's looking for revenge. Also follow Kane, who's not always on the right side of the law, and he's trying to figure out why his friend died and who did it. And we also follow Ariane, who is a sorcerer, who knows that she'll end up as one of these power generators powering the empire until she starts hearing a voice in her head who maybe gives her a different option. Now, I gave this book 3 stars. It wasn't that it was bad. It was fine. It just never really hooked me. I found the magic very interesting. I found the idea of using corpses to power the empire. It was a very fascinating setup. So it was still an enjoyable read. It was just a 3-star read for me because it never really hooked me and really held my attention. But I did like the characters and I did like other elements in the story as well. Up next, we have Uprooted by Naomi Novik. In this universe, we have the dragon who protects Agnieszka's village, which is bordering this corrupted wood where people go missing. But the price of his protection is a young girl every 10 years to come and work for him in some manner in his tower. And now time is up for someone to be picked again. And Agnieszka is pretty convinced it's not going to be her, but her friend Kajsa. Little does she know how everything will turn out. I gave this book 4 stars. I like the characters, I like the setting, I like the writing styles. I did feel at times that the pacing was a bit off, it was a bit slow, and sometimes it kind of felt like we were building to the climax of the story and I was expecting that to be the end, even though there was a lot left, and then it kind of slowed down again, so it felt a little bit wonky to me. I did find the corrupted forest elements and all the magic involved with that very interesting. I honestly could have done without some of the human politics, but that's just my opinion. That some of the parts that I felt dragged a little bit for me. I like the dragon as a character, and I thought it was fun to see Agnieszka kind of try to figure him out. And the magic was also interesting, though I will say I normally probably gravitates to a bit more of a harder magic system. So I don't normally really resonate super well with softer magic systems, but I didn't mind it here. I like the feel of it. That makes any sense at all. And now for the last audiobook I read this month, The School for Good and Evil by Soman Chainani. In this, we follow Sophie, who's always wanted to be kidnapped from her village and taken to the School for Good and Evil, where fairy tale characters, both heroes and villains, are trained for their future fairy tales because Sophie really wants to be a princess. On the other hand, we have Agatha, who would rather just stay in the village and be left alone, but Sophie really wants them to be kidnapped together because she thinks Agatha is going to be the villain in her story. But things don't go quite as planned when they do end up kidnapped and brought to the School for Good and Evil. I also gave this 4 stars. I found it quite entertaining. It was quite a fast listen, and I was hooked pretty early on. Of course, this is very fairy tale based, so there was a lot of whimsical fairy tale elements, which I enjoyed. Again, not normally something I gravitate towards, but every once in a while, very nice. Now for the characters. Sophie is the absolute worst. Like from page 1, she was just so annoying and delusional, and it was very intentional. But man, she was the worst, and she made me angry all the time. I liked Agatha. I do think she needs better friends and needs to get better about picking her friends. One thing that did kind of rub me the wrong way in the story is that there's a lot of focus on good equals beautiful, evil equals ugly. And I didn't really love that. Like, I know it's fairy tale based. It's supposed to be kind of over the top, exaggerated. But even in fairy tales, that's not always true. But overall, I did enjoy it. And I did enjoy the development over the course of the book as well. Now, those were all the audiobooks I listened to this month. Now let's get into the physical books I read this month. First, we have The Sun and the Star by Riordan and Mark Oshiro. This book is a part of the Percy Jackson universe and follows Nico D'Angelo and Will Solis as they go on a quest together. Can't really say much more than that without spoiling the previous books, so it's just a little bit of a teaser about what it's about. I gave this book 4 stars. I've always loved Nico from when he first got introduced in earlier books, and I've liked Will Solis. We haven't gotten as much from him in the previous books, but I'll admit he kind of annoyed me in this one, and I think it was intentional because of character development things, but it did get a bit too much for me, I will say. I enjoyed their quest and their adventure together, and it had that nice mix of humorous and serious moments, which I think the Percy Jackson universe does really well. So that's why I ended up on 4 stars for this one. Now, next up, we have the one Danish book I read this month, which is Aldrig for Evigt by KOFI, Berger, where we follow Amber, who's going on a camping trip with her dad and her little brother, and she is not happy about it. And it doesn't get better when their car breaks down and they end up at Jarrick Falls, where something isn't quite right. And Amber ends up kind of mixed up in trying to figure out what is going on, why are people acting so odd, and how do we get out of here? I gave this book 4 stars as well. I went into it knowing very little. I was intrigued right from the beginning. This mysterious setting, this atmospheric, a little village surrounded by woods, and something weird is going on. People are acting strange. Everything is confusing. I enjoy that. I found it very mysterious. That's the word. And I liked that I knew very little from the beginning because then I was kind of seeing things for the first time along with the characters. Now, I didn't love Amber, I'll say. She did kind of annoy me, but I felt it was in a realistic way as a teenage girl on a camping trip she doesn't want to go on, where suddenly weird things are happening. Like, I felt it was realistic portrayal. I just still found her a tiny bit annoying. But I will say I found the setting and the mystery and everything very creepy and atmospheric. And it really helped setting this eerie tone for the whole mystery element. So overall, I definitely enjoyed it. Next up, we have Dead Man's Hand by James J. Butcher. This is James J. Butcher's debut novel, and it's an urban fantasy where both magic and magical creatures are known by the general public. We follow Grimsby, who wanted to be an auditor, which is basically a magical police force, but he flunked out. And now he works in a restaurant entertaining children with simple magic tricks. Suddenly, Grimsby is suspected of a murder, and he ends up having to try and figure out who actually committed the murder and what's going on before he either ends up in prison or dead. No pressure. This I also gave 4 stars. I would say it gave me like exactly what I expected and what I wanted from a urban fantasy about crime solving. I enjoyed Grimsby as a character, and I found his imaginative use of magic because he has limited magical abilities and he has to get kind of creative and imaginative with how he uses them, and I enjoyed that. It managed to be both funny at times, like there was quite a lot of humor, but it also had very tense moments and borderline scary moments with some of the creatures and things. So I felt it was a good balance where it wasn't super dark and super serious at all times. There were funny moments, but it still did have some more serious moments. For his debut novel, I would say this was a good job, and I will definitely be continuing on with the sequel. I think the 3rd book is coming out later this year. Now for the last book I read this month, which is The New Hunger by Isaac Marion. This is the prequel to Warm Bodies, which, if you don't know, is a zombie love story. That sounds odd, but it's true. And it was made into a movie more than 10 years ago. Makes me feel old because I read Warm Bodies a couple of years before the movie came out. I feel really old. So this takes place in a zombie apocalypse. The apocalypse has already happened. Most people are dead. There are zombies everywhere. We follow Nora, who's a teen girl, and her little brother Addis as they're just trying to survive, find food, find a safe place to sleep. And we also follow Julie, who's 12, I believe, and with her parents, and they're driving, trying to find a safe place, a safe community. And then last but not least, we follow the tall man who has just awoken as a zombie and is very confused about what's going on. I gave this one 4 stars as well. It's not a long book. I think it's 160 some pages, but I found it very interesting to see the characters that I know from Warm Bodies earlier on and how they handled things and what was going on, and also a bit about the situation in the world. And it's been a while since I read Warm Bodies, but I really loved it when I read it, to the point where I was like forcing friends and family to read it as well. And I will be continuing on with rereading Warm Bodies and then the second and third book in the series because I haven't read those at all. And I did really enjoy this prequel. It was a nice little return to this zombie universe. So those were all my reads of the month. Let me know if you've read any of these, and if you have, what were your thoughts? If you haven't, are there any that you're interested in reading? Either way, I hope you enjoyed the video. See you next time. Bye!